You're watching Community Conversations, a Concord TV production.
And welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Josh Hardy, Concord TV Executive Director. And we have a special episode today. I'd like to introduce our guest, Anthony Poore, who is the Executive Director from New Hampshire Humanities. Hey, thanks a lot for coming in and joining me.
Absolutely,
and
thanks for having me.
So what prompted me, besides loving what New Hampshire Humanities does in general, what prompted me to asking you to come in here today was you guys have an interesting initiative that I read about recently, Humanities at Work. I guess first off, maybe just tell us a little bit, for anyone who doesn't know about New Hampshire Humanities, maybe kind of your mission.
Sure.
You know, sort of the quick version of your mission. But I'd also love to learn more about what the Humanities at Work program is.
Sure. Well, for those of you, or those out there who don't know about New Hampshire Humanities, well, I guess I'm going to hopefully change that a little bit today. So, we've operated in New Hampshire for 45 years. New Hampshire Humanities was created when President Johnson created the NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities. So we've operated here in the state for 45 years. And what we do is we connect people with ideas and or create safe places for difficult conversations. We do a whole host of things. In the state, we principally have three roles. One is that of convener. So for example, last year we convened around 549 programs around the state, all free of charge. So if you're north of the Notch or south of the Notch, Seacoast or Upper Valley, there's something for you, which has been great. The second role we play in the state is that of a small funder. And so that's one of the ways we extend our reach. We're a small shop. We only have 11 people, full-time and part-time. But allows us to support community-based organizations who are providing humanities programming in their region that's specific to their regional need. And so we have two little pots of money there. We call them our mini grants, $1,000 or less, typically for smaller projects. And then we have what we call our major grants, which are a little $10,000 or less to fund more longer-term efforts. Lastly, which is interesting, is we've been increasingly been taking on some headier subjects. And I would say our third role is that of hopefully a catalyst for positive systems change here in the state to support the state in really significant ways, and that's what we hope to do.
That's great. And so the Humanities at Work is an opportunity for the mission of New Hampshire Humanities to bring that, and you were telling me before we came on the air, it's to go to where the people are, right? And a lot of us are at work, right?
That's right.
So it seems to make sense.
Well, that's exactly right. And so if you think about it, last year, New Hampshire Humanities in some way, whether through our face-to-face programming or through our digital content, connected with approximately 174,000 granted staters. That's a fair sized number, right? It's a little over 10% of the population. But when you begin to peel that back, you begin to realize who wasn't participating in our programs. And one of the glaring oversights was the demographic of young parents. And if the majority of our programs are delivered through community-based organizations, say around 6:30, as an older parent, no longer have younger parents, but I do remember what that was like, for us to expect a young mother or father or both to attend one of our programs at 6 or 6:30 after the workday or local library or local, housing organization, whatnot, is not realistic because they're too busy feeding their children, checking homework as they should, getting the house in order, all the stuff that young parents do. And so we thought if the majority of your time is spent at the workplace, why don't we go to where the people are at? The old saying was take the mountain to Muhammad, if you will, and so that's what we've done. And so it's been an opportunity for us to, one, extend our reach, two, to ensure that those who haven't had the opportunity to participate in our programming have that opportunity. And three, and most importantly, is to really just support New Hampshire's workforce and our local employers, which are such a critical part of what we do every single day.
And so you mentioned employers. From that perspective, it would seem like as employers are looking for what separates themselves from other employers, basically benefits and things like that, it seems like a low-cost benefit to have one of these Humanities at Work programs to include that as part of a benefits package at your workplace.
That's exactly right. And so when we started this idea, I had the opportunity to spend time with the Director of Personnel, or HR, for Delta Dental. And she was at the time sharing with me that she had participated in one of our programs and how thoughtful she thought it was and how it really created dialogue within the workplace. And that got me thinking. But the reality is this, is that we have an unemployment rate of 2.5% in the state. And consistently we're hearing from employers is that their desire to maintain or retain their workforce, because finding a qualified workforce in the state of New Hampshire right now is difficult. Not only are we dealing with the low unemployment rates, historically low, probably some of the lowest in the United States, but we also have issues with opioid crisis and addiction. And so even identifying folks who can pass the initial screening. So the idea is you then want to hold on and retain their employees. And so to your point earlier, what they're looking for are low cost or no cost additions to their benefits package that really support their long-term employee retention strategies. And so it costs an organization, and remember, we're a small business, if you will, small nonprofit business, if you will, which I think nonprofit is a misnomer, because in order for it to do the work we have to do, it requires us to pay for our overhead, right?
Right, exactly.
So,
cover costs, yep.
Yeah, the whole nonprofit thing I don't necessarily agree with in terms of nomenclature, but I understand why it's there.
Sure.
But this is, what employers are looking for. What I'm looking for is we want to ensure that we create the most hospitable environments for our employees that we can, so we can ensure that they stay here.
Yep.
So whether it's making sure your policies and procedures reflect today's current workspace and what people are looking for, so they can bring their whole selves to the workplace, or what employers are looking for, again, are low-cost additions to their employee benefits package, support their employer retention strategies in pursuit of. So overall, it's been very good. It's been well received so far.
That's great. Now, could you give me like an example of how a typical session may go? I know that it seems like there's quite a few different ones and some variables. Could you kind of talk me through that, how that works?
Sure. In the initial kind of run-up to launching this program, we went through a series of interviews, and we asked 3 questions. Number 1 was, is there a real, tangible business need for this type of programming in your workplace? And if the answer is yes, then number 2, how should it be structured and delivered in such a way that it maximizes participation? So if you're in the C-suite or you're in the shop floor, you can participate. And third, it was really, this is a fee-for-service opportunity for us. This is a way for us to support our bottom line. If you're looking for this type of training opportunities, what's the appropriate price point? You know what I mean? Those kinds of things. And as such, in terms of bringing it to them, some of the programs we've been able to offer have been those that are available off the shelf. So that is to say, we're premiering 30 programs in the month of September that'll be coming up, where as your local employer, they can say, hey, those are the programs that we're looking for, and those are the ones that we want to offer. Now, that can be offered, for example, in Amherst Labels we worked with recently. This is something they have traditionally done for eons. Third-generation family-owned company based out of Amherst, New Hampshire, have been working on this effort and understood it. They actually dedicate, I think, 90 minutes for these types of sessions. Okay. Most recently, we were here in Concord. We did one of the local, it was an hour over lunch. Yep. So it just depends. We like to go and meet the needs of that individual employer and make it as easy as possible.
That's great, and I think that fits the need of what employers are looking for, and that you guys can shape it a little bit towards if they have 90 minutes or 60 minutes, or you had mentioned one where it was about, I don't know if it was the history of beer or something like that, but incorporated demos or kind of.
That's right.
And over lunchtime, that's really an appropriate time to be able to do that.
Right.
So,
it was our history of brewing in the state and the impact that it had on our economics in the state back then. Yep. And so that was delivered at one of our local companies here in Concord. Over the lunch hour, they brought in lunch for their employees. They learned about that. It was a great team building exercise. They had a little bit of samples so they could try some of the local breweries. Yep. And then they went on back to their work.
And just looking at some of the list of the program list that we have, I'm not going to read through all of them, but I mean, we go through history, we go through music, I mean, storytelling, creativity, so it really is, and looking at the list for each one of those categories, you really have hit, every kind of subcategory of humanities for New Hampshire. There's definitely national ones. I saw about George Washington and about nested doll making, and so it's hyperlocal, statewide, national, international, and it seems like from the list that I saw, you really have a wide variety that employers can choose from, program-wise.
They can, and it's interesting. I mean, a lot of the employers are choosing things like, what is the definition of happiness? What is happiness? We're seeing a lot of the history programs, the history of the MSCAG industries, as an example, history of the mills, and so we're seeing a lot of the history programs are of principal interest to employers as well.
Do you have any particular programs, you mentioned the Amoskeag manufacturing, are there any that really for you hit home, or you mentioned the happiness one, are there any in particular that you kind of think are topics, some of the big ones that really hit home for you? You know.
You mentioned the happiness a moment, and this is an opportunity for me to raise up an organization here in New Hampshire called Stay Work Play.
Yep.
And so they recently, about last summer, they released a study that looked at what millennials are looking for in the workplace. And what we're looking for, I wouldn't say me because I'm a little on the older scale there, but what younger employers are looking for is a place where they can bring their whole self to, right? This is a place that respects me. It's a place I can contribute. I have agency and responsibility. And to be able to go into a place that's thinking about me as a total person, not just a person who's required to deliver this product or service at this given time, has been extraordinary. And the feedback from both employer and employee has been phenomenal. And it's been mutually, it's really a win-win-win. It's a win for us because it helps us support our bottom line. It's a win for the local employer because it's a low-cost addition to their employee retention strategies and package. And for the employee, it's an opportunity for them to participate in something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to participate in because it's delivered at a time that is appropriate for their need.
Like you said, win-win-win for everybody. Now, I'll put you on the spot a little bit with this one, here we go. Now, if Concord TV were to, because I definitely think from the perspective of employer now, I'm in that position now where that's where my head goes with it. Is there a program from the list that you would say, hypothetically, that would be beneficial for a TV station or for a media organization? Boy, really put you on the spot there, and we could talk.
It's interesting. I think it depends on. Well, here's the thing. Here's a good answer, non-answer, if you will.
Perfect. There we go.
Right. Number one is the design we have is you can either choose the programs that were currently available, or if you have a specific interest or need, we actually work with those employers to develop something that's specific to you and the needs here at Concord TV. And so it could be either or. It could be that. I mean, one of the things I think has been most interesting for one of the most widely prescribed programs has been this program on happiness. Yeah. What is happinous? How is it measured? How do we find it?
And what makes us happy?
And what makes us happy? Those kinds of things. And these are the big questions that I think the humanities can help answer through that lens of the humanities. We talk about workforce readiness, we talk about participation readiness, but we also talk about existential readiness, such as who am I, what's my place on this planet, and what can I contribute to the collective conscious and to the greater good. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and we want to stay connected. And I think that's where New Hampshire Humanities is really uniquely positioned in the state to be able to provide that, as I said earlier, safe places for difficult conversations, or frankly, connecting people with ideas.
And you had mentioned millennials in the workforce. We're now getting to the point where Gen Z is going to be entering the workforce as well, which has its differences, but also it seems to have the same. They're asking, well, why do I care about this? It's not just I clock in at 8 and I leave at 4 and I take my 1-hour lunch break. It's being integrated in their work and kind of this more holistic kind of, well, why do I care? Why do I do this?
That's right.
Which is different, but I think the humanities, it seems like, can provide those answers.
Well, what you described is critical thinking skills. The why, the what, the how, the things that people want to think. So absolutely, and that's when I talked about participation readiness. We talk about workforce readiness. How do you work collectively in a group? How do you have conversations? Those kinds of things. I think the humanities are, again, positioned so well to do precisely what you just described. I really do.
Yeah. So another thing from my perspective, working here at Concord TV from a TV station, is we're very integrated in both the technology side, the STEM fields, the engineering and the technology, but also in the arts. People say STEAM, you have to include the arts in with that. And I tend to want to be supportive of all fields and think it's all about balance, and that humanities can tie into that. And that even from a technology world, here you and I are talking about humanities, and to me, I think it's crucial to integrate all that. What do you think about that?
I think you're exactly right. And right now, I'll cite 2 specific examples. If you look at the literature right now, organizational development literature, organizational effectiveness literature, and the impact of the humanities field, employers now recognize that, yes, it's important to have hard skills in science and technology and mathematics and so on. But what more and more employers are beginning to recognize is the power of the soft skill. And how important that is to not only ensuring that you have an efficient and effective workforce, but also ensuring that they work effectively together as human beings within this space called the workplace. Absolutely positively, that is well known and well documented for sure. What you're also beginning to see in the academy, if you will. And I was just having a conversation with the dean for UNH Manchester earlier this week, or last week rather, forgive me. And he was talking about, yes, it's important for our students to have the hard skills, but what the local employers in Manchester are looking for is, can this person come into my workplace, handle themselves well, and be able to adjust to a changing environment? And so this is what employers are looking for. It's the IQ, yeah, how smart are you? It's the EQ, yes, are you emotionally balanced and can you handle working in a space? But there's also this thing called the AQ, the adaptability quotient, which is your ability to adapt to a changing circumstance. You use critical thinking skills to help inform your next step. Again, that's where the humanities can be helpful.
So humanities are helping make potential employees more adaptive to a changing world around them.
More adapted to a changing world around them, and through the lens of history, religion, and all the other fields, give them the lens to view this, because history is a great teacher. And so to be able to look through those lenses, I think are really, really helpful to people, and people are looking for that more and more.
So anytime you and I have talked, clearly this is a passion for you. It's not just work. I mean, you're basically the living example of finding passion in the work that you do, and particularly the humanities. What drove you in your life to have a passion for the humanities in general?
Well, one is my own deep appreciation for culture and arts. You know, as a musician and somebody who likes to write, these are things that I enjoy personally. You know, these are personal interests of mine. But at the same time, when I think about the importance of the work that we do, I think humanities is a tool in the toolbox for me for my focus on equitable economies and sustainable communities. And I think humanities is one of the tools in the toolbox. I'm not saying it's the tool, it's merely a tool. And so that's what really drives me, and I think it drives the organization.
And I think it's more important than ever in New Hampshire that we have an appreciation, right, for our history and our culture and the arts. And to me, it seems like a balance, I mentioned briefly before, but about local, statewide, national, global. It seems like there's kind of that unpeeling the onion that you have to kind of, and the list of programs for the humanities at work seems like it balances all of that really well.
We hope so. And the idea is we want to extend people's reach and their perceptions, right, or how they think about the world. And yes, so I may live in Groveton, New Hampshire. Groveton, New Hampshire is in the county called Coas, which is in the state called New Hampshire, which is part of these 50 contiguous, if not contiguous, 48 contiguous, and so on. And so, yeah, we are part of something larger than ourselves. And it's important for New Hampshire to connect to our broader self, if you will, and for the broader self to come into our space as well.
Good for you to reference the North Country too. They don't get enough love up there too. Yeah,
Listen,
there we go.
Deep appreciation from our North Country partners.
Yeah, a lot of people I know up there. It's a long drive up there, but beautiful.
It's worth it.
Yeah. Do you have to, for work, New Hampshire Humanities, do you travel basically all over New Hampshire, wherever?
We're a statewide organization, so there's not one part of the state, frankly, that we don't look to work in. In fact, our newest hire actually came from Stark, New Hampshire.
Okay.
And so it really deepened. We wanted to focus on it, so we really deepened our connection to the North Country to extend that work.
Great, yeah. Because people forget that, you know, above the notches, it seems like sometimes almost like people forget it's part of New Hampshire.
Yes, us Flatlanders do sometimes forget about the North Country. Yeah. Yes, we do.
So another thing before we finish up, I did want to talk to you about, you have an annual dinner coming up.
We do.
I just wanted to give you a chance, I think it's October 10th at the Doubletree in Manchester, but just wanted to give you a chance just to mention that or talk.
I appreciate this so much. So on October 10th, we'll be celebrating our 30th annual dinner. This is a special year in the sense of we're doing things quite differently. Number one, we've themed this called Tell Us Your Story, in which you're going to hear through the voices of those who participate in our programming and those who are consumers of it, or participants, or speakers, presenters. Through their voice, we'll share the stories of our organization's impact in the state. Again, Tell Us Your Story. And you'll hear stories from, for example, the NEH chairman, John Peedy, who's going to share a very personal story of his and talk about the influence of the humanities in our lives. Very, very excited about that. This year we'll be honoring someone very special here in the state of New Hampshire, Steve Taylor, who you may not know was the founding executive director for New Hampshire Humanities. And so we joke, he and I were best of friends, and we'll see each other next week in Meriden. And we often will say he was crazy enough to think that he could start this thing called New Hampshire Humanities, and I'm crazy enough to think I can keep it going. And so it's an
Yep.
honor, and Senator Shaheen will be there to join us because he was her agricultural commissioner for 25 years, and is a wonderful man. It's going to be a wonderful event. Again, it's October 10th. There's a DoubleTree in downtown Manchester. Tickets are available, and we'd love to have everybody join us. It's going to be an event like no other.
Got to celebrate those anniversaries and the 30 years and celebrate really what your organization is all about. So,
Well, it's an opportunity for us to live out our values around access, innovation, and elevation.
those are kind of the three categories, right? Those are the initiatives. Could you say those three again?
Yeah, so it's our organizing
Yep.
philosophy as an institution. So number one, it's access.
Yep.
It's ensuring that everybody who has an interest in the humanities, that our programs are accessible regardless of where you live, who you love, or how large your pocketbook size is. Number two, it's about innovation. It's about ensuring that both our content is innovative, that is to say it's relevant to today's needs and issues, but it's also delivered in innovative ways. So that's whether through our traditional face-to-face model in the workplace, our humanities in action work, where we actually experiential learning opportunities. And coming up in October, we'll release our new podcast series.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Called Past Lives, which is another opportunity for us to connect with great staters around the state. And lastly, it's about elevation. And you heard me say this earlier. We understand that rising tides, in fact, do lift all boats here in this state. And we'll be successful if our partners are successful. So we want to elevate them as much as possible. So for us, our theology, our operating principles, access, innovation, elevation.
Thank you for explaining that. I just thought that was, the way you explained that was perfect. So thank you. I
Oh, my
appreciate
goodness.
that.
Well, thank
yeah.
you very much.
Yeah. So I guess one of the last questions I wanted to ask related to the podcast. Another thing we had discussed off camera was about distribution of content. And I think we had kind of a fascinating discussion about that, about how the way people consume media changes. And at Concord TV, we have to consider that all the time.
Right.
So was it kind of because of that that you thought the podcast was necessary, was a good idea given how much people listen to podcasts? And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of podcasts. I listen to them routinely, frankly, whether I'm pulling weeds out in my yard or I'm driving up to Groveton, New Hampshire, as we talked about earlier, all the time. But you're exactly right. We need to meet the people where they're at and how they want to consume, frankly, our product called the Humanities. We need to make sure that we're delivering it in a way that's easily consumable. And so, a certain segment of our population likes our traditional face-to-face model, as you call it, the sage on the stage. Well, we got something for you. Younger people want to learn while doing, so we call that our Humanities in Action, our experiential learning. We can act and do at the same time while we learn. You want to learn in the workplace over lunch? We got something for you. All right, and so the idea, and we have our digital humanities work now, so we're expanding that. So what we're trying to ensure that regardless of where you come into this tent called New Hampshire Humanities, there's a portal ready, willing, and able for you to walk through.
That's great. Now, Anthony, I think we've covered a lot, but I'm wondering, is there anything else that you were hoping you could come in here today and mention that maybe we haven't had a chance to say yet?
No, I really just want to encourage folks to take the time to visit us at really www.newhampshirенhhumanities.org. Again, that's www.nhhumanities.org. Check out our website, look at what we're doing. If you're interested, come. I'm really excited. The one thing I do want to plug while I'm here is we'll be launching the second series called Ideas on Tap. Last year was a wonderful series for us. It was an opportunity to engage in very heady subjects, where we were talking about the impact of income inequality in our state on our democratic processes, or the collateral consequences of a criminal record as we look at core reform and check the box at the State House. This year we'll launch the first, and we've expanded it, so we'll go as north to Plymouth this year. We've included Nashville this year. But we have a residency here in Concord at Area 23.
Oh, okay.
And we'll be launching the first series. We'll be looking at the impact of the legalization of marijuana in the state. And what does it mean for us as an island covered or surrounded by states that have legalized? And is this an opportunity for us to recover some of that income back into the state? And heck, maybe we can fund our educational system or something alike. And so it's a heady subject. And of course, we'll be talking about issues around, for example, around income inequality. We're asked to duplicate that. We'll be talking about the impact of climate change here in the state, what that means for us as a state. We'll be talking about, we've been asked to go back to the topic around artificial intelligence and deep learning, and what does that mean for us as we're looking at, they say 50% of all jobs are replaced by 2025 by mechanization. What does that mean for us?
Right.
And so these are some of the subjects that we're beginning to tackle with some of these things, like we talked about Ideas on Tap.
And you know what's funny, listening to you talking about all of these different topics about automation or marijuana legalization, these are all conversations, and there's different sides people have. And to me, I always think about content-wise, being in a TV station or, where we do production. Every one of those topics could be an episode. Every one of those topics, I mean, every episode, every topic is an episode, basically. If you listen to NHPR, we're always talking about things like that. So it gets the wheels turning for me, thinking about there's always stories that we can tell. And even if we don't always agree, I think it's great that we can, with the help of New Hampshire Humanities, at least have those discussions.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about New Hampshire, is we do like to engage in conversation, and we're willing to do that, for good or for bad.
Right.
And so what we want to continue to do at New Hampshire Humanities is do what? Create safe places for difficult conversation, right, and engage people with ideas. If we can do those two things, I think we're living out our mission.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and I think it's just really exciting, and I hope people who are watching and people who are living in New Hampshire consider New Hampshire Humanities for their workplace, or really, like you said, you're trying to get to where the people are, so really anyone in New Hampshire, you guys are a great resource. And so I just wanted to thank Anthony Poore. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Executive Director, New Hampshire Humanities. And you had mentioned social media, your website, nhhumanities.org. You have a good social media presence, so make sure you guys follow them there. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching Community Conversations. We'll see you again soon.